Our God is a mountain mover, and He's still moving mountains every day. And the good news is, He can move your mountains too. Hi there, this is Sue Cooper. Welcome to It's a God Thing radio program. Thanks for joining us today. You're about to hear some awesome interviews with believers in Jesus Christ who will tell you how God has revealed and proved Himself to them by moving mountains they were unable to move by themselves. They say that their stories can only be described as a God thing. Ready for a blessing? Let's roll. Here's our host, Chuck Cooper, with a great God thing story.
Our guest today is Weezy McFadden from Fort Gaines, Georgia. Weezy has been struggling with a terrible, traumatic incident in her life about 6 months ago. And we're glad to have Weezy with us today. Weezy, tell me what you've been facing these last 6 months.
Well, on July 6th, my best friend, he killed his girlfriend, and then he killed himself. And it really traumatized my life. It changed my whole life around. I didn't understand why. I don't understand why now. But I just have to keep on trusting in the Lord and ask the Lord for strength to help me get over this.
How have you been able to cope? Weezy, that is something. I mean, that is a terrible thing to have to face. Did you have support of your family? How have you been able to cope with that?
Well, first of all, pray, and I pray, and I prayed and didn't understand. But the Lord, I started going to church, praying to the Lord to help me and strengthen me and help me to deal with this situation. And at first, God wasn't answering my prayers because I used to pray all through the day. At night, I couldn't hardly sleep. I went to the doctors. I was so depressed. I lost 16 pounds.
You didn't have any appetite?
I didn't have an appetite. I didn't eat anything, just enough just to make me through.
Now, Weezy, you mentioned you went to church. Had you been attending church, or what was your faith before this happened?
I always believed in God, but I was not living for the Lord. I always believed in the Lord, and I wasn't giving the Lord the significant time that He needed.
So when you, after this happened, you decided to start attending church, or you went to church for some help or some guidance?
I got afraid to die. Everything crossed my mind. A lot of what ifs. This happened. What if that happened? What if? It was a state of mind that I never experienced in my whole life. It's just something that I went through that I never experienced. My feelings, something was oppressing me down deep in my soul, that I could not find joy, and I could not find happiness. And I felt like I forgot to know how to live. I forgot how to live.
Why'd you start going to church?
I started going to church because I knew that I just kept praying to the Lord, asking the Lord to help me from this feeling, this state of mind that I was in. And I started going to church because I knew that's where my help came from, is the Lord. And I know, and I just knew down that's the only person that could help me. And I had to get closer to the Lord, and He drew me closer to Him.
Well, tell us about that. How did He draw you closer, Weezy?
Everything that I used to do, every desire that I had when I was not living for the Lord, He took it away from me.
Immediately?
In the course of during the 6-month period, in 2 months I was delivered from everything that I was not pleasing in the Lord's eyesight.
Oh, good for you, and good for Him. And good for Him. Well, what's your life been like since the Lord started helping you through this? How has your life changed? Have you lost friends?
I have lost. I still have friends, but I don't have the friends I used to hang with. They still will speak and communicate with me, but we don't hang out together.
Now, this is a small town you grew up in.
Yes, sir.
And everybody knows everybody.
Everybody does.
And everybody knows everybody's business.
Everybody knows everything.
And so have you been able to make some new believer friends?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. I attend church, and I attend, it doesn't matter which church I go to as long as they're teaching the word and I'm getting the word from God. And I just love going to church. And
have the members of the church been helpful to you?
yes, they have. Ministers has been helpful to me. And
now you do a lot of, you started getting into the Bible, haven't
yes.
you?
Yes, I have.
Tell our folks about that and how comforting that is to
I
you.
read my Bible all the time, and I get feeling so much better. I get comfort, and I read Proverbs every day because it had 31 chapters in it.
Good. Somebody advised you well.
Yes.
One proverb every day.
One proverb every day. And I pass that along to the people that works with me.
Well, let me ask you about that. Weezy, you work for a state organization, and how have and you've worked here a long time.
14 years.
14 years, and obviously your fellow employees and your fellow workers, your co-workers have noticed a change in you.
Yes.
How have they responded to you?
My site manager, Annette Holland, she also helped me too through this, and they see the change in me. I don't have to tell anybody anything. They just see a different person.
Well, Weezy, you have a very outstanding personality and a huge, huge heart, and you have a reputation for that in town.
Yes.
And sometimes that heart has caused people to try to take advantage of you.
Right.
But you've pressed on, and
Yes.
Your life has changed around. We may have some folks listening of all ages that have experienced the loss of a loved one, perhaps not in as traumatic or dramatic situations yes. you've had to face. I think it might be helpful, Weezy. What would you suggest to them on how to deal with that and how to handle if that happens to them?
You just have to pray and trust in God and believe, and He will see you through.
Now, you said earlier that you prayed and prayed and prayed, and for a while there you didn't think the Lord was listening to you.
I thought the Lord wasn't listening to me. I said, why don't you hear me, Lord? Why don't you hear me? I am your child. And finally, as days go past on by and by and by, I got stronger. I had a renewed mind,
and
a clean spirit. And I always had a big heart, so.
Yes, you have. He's blessed you with a big heart.
Yes, He did.
Everybody I know loves Weezy, and you've been a good example. Is there anything else that you'd like to say? You mentioned that you read Proverbs a lot. Do you have a particular favorite Bible verse?
Psalms 27.
27th Psalm, okay,
yes.
And just refresh our listeners' memory. What does Psalms 27 tell you?
The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life.
Yes, He has. He sure has. You've been a good example. And Weezy, you know what? You now have a personal ministry, not only by what you say, and you're pretty outspoken now about the Lord, and that's a good thing. That's what He wants.
Yes.
But you have a ministry, and not only with what you say, but also in the way you've changed your life, the way the Lord has helped change your life.
Yes.
Well, I have one final question, Weezy.
Yes.
Would you, I know it's only been 6 months, and the pain's still there.
Yes, it is.
I can see it in your eyes. I can see it in your tears. But your life has been changed.
It has been changed. And I think, and I believe now, that God allowed this to happen so that I could become closer to Him. What I went through, I really, truly believe that.
What a great confession that is. A lot of folks, me included, sometimes we're so stubborn. We know what to do, but we're stubborn.
Right.
And a lot of times it takes an event that's pretty traumatic to get our attention. And you're saying that's what happened through this.
I truly believe it with all my heart.
Well, Weezy, I want to thank you so much for your willingness to bring back some painful thoughts, but your willingness to share your story, as I said earlier. Sharing your story over the radio, you never know, just never know how people are going to be influenced by this and when they have to face a similar situation. So I want to ask you one final question. Would you say that the Lord helping you to get through this was a God thing?
Yes.
He moved a mountain you couldn't move by yourself?
Yes, he did. And I know it. I know down deep in my heart it was the Lord, because I'm getting better and better every day.
Yes, you are. In fact, every day when I see you, and I ask you, I said, "Hey, Weezy, how you doing today?" And that big old pretty smile you have, you shout out, "Chuck, I'm getting better every day."
Every day.
Well, praise the Lord for that. Thank you so much, Weezy.
Thank you.
Wow, what a great story. I don't know about you, but we here at It's a God Thing Radio are both inspired and encouraged and even awed when we hear stories like the one you're hearing today. We think God Thing stories prove to all who hear them how God continues to work every day in the lives of His believers. We also believe strongly that sharing God Thing stories with not yet believers might just cause them to remember similar events in their own lives. Hopefully, those remembrances will cause them to consider that there may be something to God and Jesus after all. Sharing your own God Thing story, yes, your own story, is a great way to witness to your family, friends, co-workers, schoolmates, and even strangers. Who won't listen when you begin a conversation by saying, "My goodness, you won't believe what happened to me a while back," or, "Gosh, I'm so excited about what happened to a couple at our church. Let me tell you about it." Then tell your own story or share one you've heard here. Doing so just might cause someone to accept Jesus as Savior and Lord. Now let's get back to today's program.
Well, Chuck, this is a story that I have wanted to share with you for some time. And whenever I hear the phrase, "it's a God thing," there's no doubt that this is the story that comes to my mind. So when I found out that you were going to do this radio program, I knew that one day I would really want to share this story with both you and your listeners. This is something that is absolutely true. I couldn't make something like this up, even if I wanted to. In the first place, I don't usually lie to you. And in the second place, I'm not creative enough to make up a story like this. This is really a God thing. This is an incident that happened about 15 or so years ago when we had 2 teenage daughters. And at that time, money was very, very tight at our house. And like so many people, we were living paycheck to paycheck. And right before this incident happened, we had been tithing for a number of years. And our minister had challenged the congregation to see if we couldn't go 1% or 2% above the tithe. And so Tom and I had decided that that's something that we wanted to do. And so we had decided that we would begin giving 12% to the church. And it was a promise we made to each other and a promise that we made to God. So one day, I was at school working, and Tom happened to be off of his job that day. And he came over to the school to have lunch with me. And we were eating in my room. And while we were eating, he said to me, "Oh, by the way, I paid bills last night, and I made a double payment on one of our bills. And so our grocery money is going to be a little tight this month." And I said, "Okay, what do you mean by tight?" And he said, "Well, we have about $75 for the rest of the month," which was almost all of the month. Well, I absolutely hit the ceiling and said, "You expect us to feed ourselves and 2 teenage daughters on $75 a month? There's absolutely no way that we can do that." And I was very, very angry. So we had words back and forth. And he was about to leave, and as he was about to leave, I said, very foolishly, well, maybe we're just giving too much to the church. We just need to cut back.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh is right. He whipped around and pointed his finger at me, and he said, absolutely not. That is not an option. Thankfully, I am married to a man of God who remembers a little bit more than I remembered at that time, that we need to keep our promises to each other and to God. And I knew that I had said the wrong thing and gone a little bit too far that time. So I said, okay. I knew that I needed to save face. And so I said to him, then on Saturday, when I go to the grocery store, you're coming with me, and you're going to see just how far $75 goes to feed a family of 4. And he said, okay, I'll do that. So Saturday comes, and we are driving down the street. And let me describe how it was. We were on kind of a side street, and we were approaching a cross street that was a little bit more of a, it was a state highway. And so there was traffic coming back and forth. And as we're driving down this side street, he's over on his side trying to do happy talk, oh, aren't the leaves beautiful? And, trying to get me to talk. And I'm sitting over on my side, arms folded tight, looking out the window, pouting, because I was going to prove my point to him that $75 was not going to feed a family of 4. So as we approached the highway, we came up to a stop sign, and we were probably, 100 yards or so away. And all of a sudden, we saw a truck go by rather fast. And the doors of that truck flew open, and out flew crates and crates of frozen food. And it littered the highway. There was just frozen food everywhere. It was a delivery truck. We found out later it was a frozen food truck going from a
distribution center.
Yeah, distribution center. At least that's what we assume. Well, we got to the stop sign. There were not cars coming, but we knew that we had to get the frozen food to the side of the road so that other cars didn't hit it.
Sure.
So we got out and we started taking these crates of food to the side of the road, and there we stood.
Now, had the truck disappeared, or
the truck had disappeared? It kept going.
He didn't know that he'd lost this stuff.
He didn't know that he had lost the food.
Oh my goodness me!
There was food everywhere. We looked all over the food, and the only thing we saw was a name, and it was a little bit of an unusual name. And so we went home. We called the local locker, frozen food locker place, and said, did anybody by this name have some food there? And they were, no, we don't know what you're talking about. We looked in the phone book, couldn't find the name anywhere. We had not seen on the truck the name of the truck or anywhere. And so there we were with all this food. So Tom said, okay, what are we going to do? And so he went back home and got his truck. And I stood there with the food and just waited along the side of the road with all this frozen food. So we loaded the food up on his truck, took it home, put most of it in our freezer, but there was way too much to put in our freezer. And by this time we had made the phone call, couldn't figure out who this food belonged to. And I'm not talking just a few packages of frozen vegetables. I'm talking steaks and pork chops and roasts and hamburger and corn and beans and potatoes, and there were vegetables I'd never even heard of. I mean, you just can't imagine the amount of frozen food. Couldn't find the owner, and so we decided the only thing to do was to put it in our freezer, and give away what we could. So we gave away some to some of our neighbors. We gave away some to a children's home nearby. We gave away some to friends, and we still had a whole freezer full of. Now, Malachi tells us that we should test God and that we should try Him and that He'll open the floodgates of heaven and pour out His blessings. Now, I know this is not a literal thing, but in my mind, I can just see some of the angels up there just dumping frozen food
out on the highway.
Out on the highway for us, just at the time that that we needed it the most. I recently heard that you don't give for the purpose of receiving. We give because we love God and because it's a natural response of the love that God gave to us. But this was just a case of an example where, because we gave and because of especially Tom's faithfulness in honoring his promise, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was a God thing, that we were there just at that time, and that our $75 for the month was stretched into 2 or 3 months of groceries. And so I just wanted to tell you about what I think God just has a marvelous sense of humor, and He just does unbelievable things. He really is a good God.
Well, that's true. Thank you so much, Marjo, for sharing that story. And you know, this is the first time I've ever heard that manna from heaven was frozen.
Absolutely. It was in our case.
It's a God thing. Thank you
is.
so much for sharing that story. Frank Rosendahl of Ham Lake, Minnesota, lost his wallet. Many times, most of us has lost a wallet at one time or another, and we know how difficult it is to replace all the documents that we carry in it. But Frank, welcome to our program today. But tell us, how did you lose your wallet?
Well, it was a beautiful day up in Minnesota, and my son and grandson and I went fishing on a Saturday afternoon after working at the camp. Well, I carried my wallet in my pocket whenever I fish because that's where my license is.
Sure.
So I had a Glastron boat, and I put a bracket on the front so I could run an electric motor for trolling. So we decided to go try and catch some walleye. So we went out into one of the other lakes other than Trout Lake and kept drifting and never got any bites. And we went from 4 feet to 35 feet of water. After that, my son said, well, maybe, Dad, we should go over and try and get some bass. We know they bite. So we went over into Trout Lake, and there's a weed bed there. So we were trolling around it and catching bass and having fun. And I had to sit up on the bow to run my motor.
Right.
So I reached down in my back pocket, and I said, Ross, I lost my wallet. He says, no, you didn't. You didn't get it. I said, yes, I carried my license in it. Made a special trip to get it out of the RV. I says, you and Levi keep on fishing, and just drop me off here, and I'll go around and check and make sure. And I went over to the RV, and it wasn't there, my wallet. So I told my wife. She gets a little excited because I had probably 3 or 4 gas cards and
Right.
a couple, 3 credit
cards in there.
So she had to start looking. She said, well, I got to find numbers and cancel those out.
Sure.
By then it was almost 10 o'clock at night, and the kids had brought the boat in and put it away for the night. Well, during the night, I woke up once and I just prayed to the Lord. I said, Lord, if I'm supposed to have my wallet, will you please lead me to it? And I went right to sleep like, sure, why not?
Yeah.
Then I woke up in the morning, we went up and had breakfast. And I came back, and my wife's sitting at the table still looking for phone numbers to call on Monday, because now it's Sunday.
Yeah.
And we had church at 11, and now it was just about 10 o'clock, about quarter to 10, 9:30, somewhere in there. And I was sitting there, and I said, Lord, where's my wallet? And just like a voice, but it was internal, because I'm the only one that heard it, said,
Right.
If you want your wallet, go out to the weed bed, and you'll find it.
The weed bed you'd been fishing.
Fishing the night before for the bass. So I went and talked to went out and said, Ross, let's go get the boat and go get my wallet. I says, the Lord just told me where to go. I said, we're supposed to go out to the weed bed. So we jumped in the boat and went out there, and we trolled around. And I'm hanging over the bow of the boat looking in the water. It's a very clear lake. You can see about 15 feet.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's very clear.
And how deep was the water right there?
Right where we were, it was about anywhere from 2.5 to 6 feet, maybe, where we were trolling around.
Sure.
And it was getting about 20 to 11. I said, well, we got to get back to church pretty soon. Then I says, it don't look like we're going to find it. My son said, but Dad, we did drift through the weed beds a couple times last night. So I made a great big arc to try to get into the weed beds. And all the time, my son and grandson are standing up in the boat looking and also fishing at the same time.
Yeah, sure.
And I said, we're getting pretty close now. And he says, yeah. He says, this is where we went in last night. And my grandson just got through bringing in his lure. And he looked down and he says, what's that? And he reached down with his lure at the end of his pole and hooked my wallet and brought it out. He says, is this what we're looking for, Grandpa?
Oh, my
And I
goodness.
said, yes, that's what we want.
How much, you had your valuables in there, but how much money was involved?
$60, $70.
$60, $70,
Yeah.
right. Now, did you tell them, your son and your grandson, that you had heard in your spirit that you needed to go back out to the weed bed?
Well, I just told him that I was told to go there by the Lord.
Oh, okay,
He said,
good.
let's go find my wallet, because I was just in there and asked about it, and the Lord said, go out to the weed bed.
Boy, that's an interesting story. A lot of folks have lost their wallet and haven't been directed to where it is. Well, Frank, we appreciate you sharing that story with us today. That's a good one. And would you say that finding your wallet was a God thing?
Well, definitely.
Well, thanks a lot, Frank. We appreciate it.
Wow, what a great half hour this has been. Tune in next time for more great God Thing stories, and tell your friends to tune in too. Oh yeah, one more thing. If you or someone you know has a verifiable story which needs to be told, please email a brief summary to us at mystory@itsagodthingradio.com. That's my story at itsagodthingradio.com. See you next time.